history books. We treat them like gospel, the absolute truth of what came before us. But what if I told you that much of what you learned in history class was wrong? Not just a little bit wrong, but fundamentally, massively, and sometimes intentionally wrong. The stories we've been told are often incomplete, heavily biased, or just plain fiction passed off as fact. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on some of the biggest things history got horribly wrong, and why correcting these mistakes is so important for understanding our world today. Let's dive in. First up, let's talk about the Vikings. Close your eyes and picture one. You're probably thinking of a big, burly, dirty barbarian with a horned helmet, right? A savage, raiding and pillaging without a second thought. This image is everywhere, from movies to sports mascots, but it's almost entirely a fabrication. The historical evidence tells a completely different story. Vikings were, first and foremost, incredibly skilled traders and explorers. Their longships, marvels of engineering, allowed them to establish vast trade networks that stretched from North America to the Middle East. They weren't just taking, they were trading goods, ideas, and culture. And the hygiene part? Archaeologists have found an abundance of grooming tools in Viking burial sites: tweezers, razors, combs, and even ear spoons. They were surprisingly clean for their time, with accounts from other cultures mentioning their regular bathing habits. They also had a complex legal system with local assemblies called things, where free men could settle disputes. So, where did this savage reputation come from? Mostly from their enemies, particularly the Christian monks whose monasteries were often targeted for their wealth. Their accounts, which were the ones that survived and got copied, painted the Vikings as godless heathens. Later, Victorian-era storytellers romanticized and exaggerated this image, even adding the horned helmets, which have never been found in a single authentic Viking burial. History simplified a complex society into a one-dimensional villain because it made for a better story. Next, let's tackle the myth that people in the Middle Ages were ignorant and lived in squalor, waiting for the Renaissance to bring back intelligence. We're taught to think of this period as a time of intellectual stagnation, where everyone was uneducated and superstitious. This could not be further from the truth. The Middle Ages were a period of incredible innovation and intellectual growth. Think about the stunning Gothic cathedrals like Notre Dame or Chartres. These weren't built by fools. They required sophisticated knowledge of engineering, geometry, and logistics that would be impressive even today. These architectural marvels were the skyscrapers of their era, pushing the limits of what was possible. And it wasn't just architecture. The very first universities were founded in the Middle Ages, in places like Bologna, Paris, and Oxford. These institutions became centers of learning, preserving ancient knowledge and fostering new debates in philosophy, medicine, and law. Mechanical inventions were also booming. The mechanical clock, a transformative piece of technology that forever changed our relationship with time, was a medieval invention. So were eyeglasses, which doubled the productive lifespan of scholars and craftsmen. The people of the Middle Ages weren't stupid. They were brilliant minds working with the tools and knowledge available to them, laying the groundwork for the scientific revolution that followed. Now for a big one. Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. This is probably one of the most persistent myths taught in schools. It's a simple, heroic tale of a brave explorer sailing into the unknown. The problem? It erases millions of people and centuries of history. When Columbus landed, the Americas were already home to thriving, complex civilizations. We're talking about an estimated 50 to 100 million people, with vast cities, advanced agricultural systems, and diverse cultures. To say Columbus discovered this land is like saying I discovered your house because I showed up at your front door uninvited. Even more, Columbus wasn't even the first European to reach the Americas. We have concrete archaeological evidence that Vikings, led by Leif Erikson, established a settlement in Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000, nearly 500 years before Columbus set sail. So why does the Columbus story stick? Because it served a narrative. It was a simple, powerful origin story for the European colonization of the Americas. It framed the story around a single heroic figure, making it easy to teach and digest. But in doing so, it whitewashed a complex and often brutal history of conquest and colonization, and ignored the vibrant civilizations that were already there. It's a classic case of history prioritizing a simple story over the messy, complicated truth. Speaking of misnomers, let's talk about the Dark Ages. The very name conjures images of chaos, ignorance, and a complete halt to human progress after the fall of Rome. It suggests Europe was plunged into a 1,000-year-long intellectual night. But this idea is largely a myth created by Renaissance scholars who wanted to emphasize the brilliance of their own era by contrasting it with the period that came before. In reality, the so-called Dark Ages were anything but dark. Progress didn't stop. It just changed its focus and location. While large-scale political unity in Western Europe fractured, innovation continued. In agriculture, new inventions like the heavy plow and the horse collar revolutionized farming, allowing people to cultivate tougher soils and dramatically increase food production. This led to population growth and the re-emergence of towns and cities. Technology was also evolving. Watermills and windmills were perfected and spread across the continent, providing a new source of power for industry. And while the Western Roman Empire had fallen, knowledge was meticulously preserved and expanded upon in other parts of the world, like the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Golden Age. Scholars in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba were making huge advances in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Knowledge was also being carefully copied and saved by monks in monasteries across Europe. The lights didn't go out, they were just shining in different places. Now, let's examine the witch trials. History often presents them as a bizarre period of mass hysteria where people genuinely believed in magic and set out to eradicate evil witches. While fear of witchcraft was real, the trials were rarely just about magic. They were a terrifyingly effective tool for social control, power, and eliminating inconvenient people. Think about who was most often accused. Overwhelmingly, they were women, particularly those who didn't fit neatly into society's expectations. Independent women who owned property, healers and midwives who worked outside the established medical system, or simply women who were considered outsiders or had personal disputes with their accusers. Accusations of witchcraft became a way to settle scores, seize property, or enforce religious and social orthodoxy. In a deeply patriarchal society, powerful and independent women were seen as a threat. The witch trials were a way to put them back in their place, often in the most brutal way imaginable. It was also a tool for political leaders to demonstrate their authority and piety, creating a common enemy to unite the populace against. History framed this systematic persecution as a quest for justice against supernatural evil, but in reality, it was often a story of human fear, greed, and the abuse of power. Finally, let's debunk the image of the all-powerful king. We imagine kings and queens from history as absolute monarchs, their every word law, ruling with unquestioned authority. The reality was far more complex. While some rulers did wield immense power, many were little more than figureheads, constantly navigating a treacherous political landscape. Their power was often severely limited by other powerful groups. The nobles, with their own lands, armies, and wealth, were a constant check on royal authority. A king who angered his most powerful lords could quickly find himself facing a rebellion. The church was another major power player. With its vast wealth, moral authority, and influence over the people, the church could challenge kings and even excommunicate them, a move that could destabilize an entire kingdom. And let's not forget the military leaders. A popular general with a loyal army behind him could be more powerful than the king he was supposed to be serving. In many cases, the real power sat behind the throne, wielded by influential advisors, powerful families, or bureaucratic institutions. The king was often just the public face of a much larger and more complicated power structure. So, as you can see, history isn't just a collection of neutral facts. It's a story. And like any story, it's shaped by the people who tell it, by their biases, their motives, and what they choose to include or leave out. History is often written by the victors, shaped by power, and simplified for the sake of a good narrative. Understanding these distortions isn't just about being a history nerd. It's about learning to think critically about the stories we're told today. Which of these historical myths surprised you the most? Is there another one you think we should cover? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed untangling the truth from the tales, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more history they never explained properly in school. Thanks for watching.